Welcome to the consulting rooms of Deckard and Booth. We are your cinematic sleuths, investigating the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir. Today's case is none other than LA Confidential from 1997, starring Russel Crowe, Guy Pearce, and Kevin Spacey. Luke, LA Confidential.
Yes.
What's it about?
Well, that depends. Are we going by what the book is about or what the film is about? The film is, the basic summary of the film is as corruption grows in 1950s LA, three policemen, one straight-laced, one brutal, one sleazy, investigate a series of murders with their own brand of justice. Matt, what was your initial reaction to rewatching this? I mean, you and I have seen this film a number of times.
Yeah.
But this your latest reaction, or if you can go back to the very first time you watched it, if you can remember, what's your general reaction to this film?
Well, I can remember the first time I watched it because I went to the cinema to see it.
Oh, okay.
I'm that old. I went to the cinema to see it. And just, it's interesting you say, what's it about? Are you talking the book or the film? And every time I watch it, because the book is a tome, it's a meaty piece of work. And every time I watch this, I'm struck by just how good an adaptation it is. It's relatively faithful. Mm-hmm. It does a good job of truncating events and characters when it needs to. But the spirit and the core of the book is all there in this film. And every time I watch it, I remember that reaction I had first time in the cinema, thinking, God, that was good. That was a layered piece of crime drama, and it was bloody well done. Well done in its own terms, and well done as an adaptation of the book. And I had the same reaction 2 nights ago when I watched it in preparation for this. I think it's a fabulous film.
Yeah, I would say my reaction is similar. Obviously, I did not see it in cinemas in 1997. I was 10.
You baby, you.
I was interested in going and seeing what was that at the time? Like, wasn't like Batman and Robin with George Clooney out at that time? Maybe.
Yeah, roundabout. Yeah.
Getting
I, by contrast, I was 23 years old when this. That doesn't mean that I didn't go and see Batman and Robin as well.
Of course not. I mean, we all thought, no, I'm not going to. I was going to talk about the bat nipples. I'm not going to go there. That's a different topic. No. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think my reaction to LA Confidential is similar. I think it's a very rich film. It's very atmospheric. It's an incredible ensemble movie that, frankly, is miraculous that it works at all. All the signs really point to this film not working because, as you were saying about the book being a tome, like, it's nuts. I mean, James Ellroy at one point mentioned that 20% of the book is the movie and 80% isn't there. And that's because there's a lot of backstory, a lot of flashback stuff that he goes into in the book that is taken out.
A novel can do that. A novel's got time to breathe.
Yes.
A film's got 2 hours to get you, tell the story and get you gone.
Definitely.
So when you're adapting and it's a harder skill than people might think, adapting a book.
Oh God, yeah.
You've got to learn what to pick and choose, and part of the skill of being an adapter is knowing what to pick and choose and what to leave out. And it might make for a richer experience reading the book, but it's no less impressive that the film does so much in its runtime. Let's
dive into the kind of the background of the film then first. There's a whole bunch of incredibly talented people behind this film, least of all Curtis Hanson, the director of the movie. So he's no kind of stranger to thriller movies. He did some of his films are Bad Influence in 1980 with Rob Lowe and James Spader, The Handle That Rocks the Cradle in 1992, River Wild in 1994. But he also did other things like Wonder Boys with Tobey Maguire and Michael Douglas, which is considered his best work apparently by fans and critics. And he's also known for The 8 Mile starring Eminem, the rapper Eminem. I had no idea that he did that
I
film.
didn't know that either.
which is I mean, I've never seen that film. I don't know if that film is any good. I just remember I like Eminem and being in a movie thinking he's a rapper. Why is he in a movie? This is weird. And never saw it. Curtis Hanson is, in terms of people who could, do a film like this, his CV definitely said, his resume was like, yeah, I could probably maybe do this. And I think he did a fantastic job because he's also a co-writer on this with Brian Helgeland. And they won an Oscar for the film, which is totally deserved, I think, you know?
They totally deserved. And it's a testament to how much work they put into it, because I think it was something like 7 or 8 drafts before they even thought it was worth showing other people. Helgeland, I think, did all of those for free, which speaks volumes not only in terms of how dedicated they were to it, but of how serious they were about getting it right. Elroy's novels are notoriously difficult to film, and things like the Black Dahlia don't come off very well, especially when you compare it to LA Confidential. Which it's like lightning in a bottle. It's just everything seemed, the stars were aligned for this film. Everything seemed to work. Everything seemed to be in place.
Yeah,
that co-writing partnership seemed to work.
Yeah,
we've mentioned this before, that very often you can tell, or you can at least have an educated guess about which screenwriter wrote which bit. But I don't think you can with this. I think this is seamless almost. You know, I think it's very well. And again, that's the draft after draft after draft.
Yes.
And as writers, you and I both know that the more drafts you do, the better the product is.
Yeah.
And it definitely shows. Directing a script that you've had a hand in writing, you're assured of keeping your vision as closely as possible, aren't you?
Yeah. No, he was. Yeah, Hanson was very, very focused about his vision of this movie, and there's interesting facts about that we'll get into a little bit later. But one thing I'll mention now is like the way that he just sort of, when he went in for these pitch meetings, he wasn't letting people necessarily read the scripts, but he was using visual cards and pictures to trigger in your mind's eye what the film would look like and be like as they were describing, which I thought was a really, really cool way of doing it.
And I think he also mentioned, instead of describing the characters, I think he used actors that he thought might have been in the time the film is set. So William Holden. I think William Holden's one of them he mentioned.
Also, just kind of give people a bit of an idea of what Brian was writing before and sort of after, because again, he has a long history of also writing thrillers, and I think this is also both of these guys love Elroy, and they love LA Confidential, and I think that's the other thing that was really working in this film's favor, is you have two guys, not just one, two guys who love the source material. Not one guy who loves it, another guy who just wants to adapt it or do his own thing with it. You have two guys who love the source. It's a bit like Lord of the Rings, where Peter Jackson and his company loved Lord of the Rings and wanted to do as faithful as possible. And I think these two guys are the Peter Jackson and co. of like thrillers, because they took an unpublishable or an unfilmable book and somehow made it work. But yeah, so Brian wrote The Nightmare on Elm Street 4 in 1988, which some say is the best in the franchise. The Assassins, he co-wrote The Assassins with the Wachowski, then brothers, now sisters. He also wrote Conspiracy in 1997 with Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts, which I remember I saw that film when I was a kid, and I remember liking it. I'm interested to go back to it though and see if that still holds up.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I remember liking it when I first saw it, but I've not watched it for such a long time. It'd be interesting to see.
Yes, he also did Payback in 1999 with Mel Gibson, and then interestingly, and this is a film we'll have to do in the future, he also wrote Spencer Confidential, which came out in 2020. It was a Netflix movie, I believe, and it's an adaptation of Robert B. Parker's character Spencer, but it's not based on any Spencer novel. It's based on the there's another guy who continues to write Spencer novels now that Robert B. Parker has passed, but it's terrible. You know, spoiler alert for whenever we get to that episode, but like it's crazy to me to see these two guys and be like, wow, they've done some incredible work, but every artist has their misfire.
Everybody's got a misfire. Everybody's got a misfire.
But yeah, a few other interesting names to know before we dive into the nitty gritty of the film. That was like, is the composer Jerry Goldsmith?
Yeah,
I mean the score, man.
Oh, the score is amazing.
Forget about it.
Yeah, it's a very nice. I always think it's a very nice companion piece.
Yeah,
to the Chinatown music, because it's same composer. But it's the use of jazz that, I mean, I'm not a jazz fan by any stretch of the imagination.
Wow.
But there's something about the way he uses jazz that just conjures up to me 1950s Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You know, and I think and I don't know if that's because the sort of saxophone sound is the cliche of Private Eye
Yeah.
music. But what Goldsmith does with it is so good.
Yes.
And
yeah.
in the scenes where the tension is building and building and building between the characters, the music is doing the same thing. It's almost like the way music follows lyrics and lyrics follow music. The scenes and the music do the same thing here. It's spot on. It really is.
Yeah, the way it's woven in is perfect. There's always these films that stand out for their music and how their music almost functions as a character. And I think of, things like Pirates of the Caribbean. I mentioned Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones. This is another one of those movies where the music is another character in the piece, and I love it. And if you don't know Jerry Goldsmith stuff, you know it without knowing it, because he's done Logan's Run, the original Planet of the Apes, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Yeah. So the theme that's in Star Trek: The Next Generation is the one that he did. He did Alien,
The Omen,
that classic, The Omen, Chinatown, Basic Instinct, Air Force One. He's up there as one of the greatest composers in the world. So you have an incredible director, a great writing duo, and an amazing composer, but they also have a really great cinematographer. It's Dante Spinazzi is the cinematographer.
And I quite like the idea that very often film noir is drenched in rain and shadows, faces lit only by sort of matches and cigarette ends and all the rest of it, car lights. This is actually quite brightly lit. A lot of this takes place in daylight. There's a reason for that, of course, which is that it's highlighting the fact that Los Angeles is on the surface a beautiful, sunny city that looks amazing, but underneath is absolutely rotten to the core. Yeah, a famous sort of film noir theme.
Yeah,
and Danny DeVito's speech at the beginning, where he says they sell you the orange groves and they sell you the sun and the beach and all the rest of it, and it's lit like that. It's shot like that.
Yeah,
that's the Los Angeles they're selling you.
Yeah,
while they're telling you a story of what it's really like.
Yeah, every shot, every composition is so gripping. That you can't. Yeah, it's a very, like, I don't know, the film is, you can call it like delicious or something like that. It's such every scene is so rich, and the way that it's framed and what is put in front of you. And the interesting thing is, like, Spinazzi did a whole bunch of films. He did the Manhunter, the Hannibal movie. He did Heat, The Insider, The Last of the Mohicans, The Red Dragon in 2002, which I know is a bit iffy in terms of the way that film is, the story and how it's presented, but it looks good. The film looks good. And another one that he did is X-Men: The Last Stand. And the reason I mentioned both of those is because, like, even though those films aren't great, there are still visuals in both of those movies that stand with me, because the way he has shot it, the way he's framed it, it's like, this is fantastic. And the guy did Heat, the guy did LA Confidential. Those movies are hugely influential. I mean, Heat inspired Christopher Nolan all over the place, through particularly The Dark Knight. So the talent behind this movie is insane. And we're not even talking about the costume design and the casting director and all that kind of stuff. There was just, it was like a lightning in a bottle, I think.
One of the things I like about the shooting and the design of the film is that it doesn't beat you over the head with its period.
Yes,
it sort of it requires you to take it for granted that this is all in period. So it's not shot with any sort of nostalgia. Quite the opposite. It's shot very much as a contemporary film of the 90s. Yeah. But the period detail is all in the background.
Yeah.
Every now and again there'll be a calendar or a postcard or just a car on the horizon or something like that, a telephone and you think, God, there is attention to detail here, but it's not rammed down my throat. It's not signposted in any way.
Yes.
Because this is the world that you're inhabiting, and people don't talk about their surroundings.
It's a really good point. It's one of the things I love about this movie, because you and I have both written historical fiction, but one thing that really agitates me about a lot of contemporary historical fiction is you'll have a moment of plot progression interrupted by a paragraph or two or a whole bloody page of I'm going to give you the history of this building, or I'm going to give you the some historical detail about the way this sort of thing works, because the author clearly did all the research. They got to put it all in there.
Yeah.
But then if you go back and you read something like, if you go and read a novel from like, go read The Great Gatsby, go read a Sherlock Holmes story. There's detail, but it's all like, it's like this, it's background detail. Like F. Scott Fitzgerald isn't going into super detail about the type of cars and the engine that Gatsby and them are driving or anything like that, or the gas station or whatever. Like it's all just, he's setting the scene quite clearly. And I think there's something so intelligent about historical fiction not beating you over the head. And
there is, I agree.
Addressing that background.
It happens a lot in Sherlock Holmes stories that people write now, where they'll say things like, Holmes consulted his pocket watch before he jumped into the hansom cab. And you said, well, he wouldn't have had any other type of watch and cab. That's just to make sure the reader isn't thinking that he looks at his wrist and, hails a black cab or something, And you think you don't need that, because once you've told somebody it's in that period, an audience will accept that. An audience will take it. But the genius of LA Confidential is that everything is authentic. And like you say, it's the world that you're being asked to inhabit. And people don't need to draw attention to it because you don't draw attention to your own time. Yeah. But when you actually look at the film, there isn't a single shot in there where it's not filled with background period detail. Yeah. So it's doing the cinematic equivalent of, or the opposite of what you're saying in historical fiction. It's saying the period detail is there, but it's not getting in the way of the story we're telling.
One of the things that was really interesting to me is looking a little bit more into the writer director and their how they approach the movie, was that what their objective was with every scene was to get from A to B and reveal something about a character along the way. And when you think about that and then you watch the film, you can see how every stinking scene does that in some way or another. Like you think about that scene towards the beginning of the movie when Sid and Vincennes are busting the couple who are making out, or gonna get it on under the Christmas tree, and there's that moment where he busts and arrests them and he's walking out and does that thing where he turns and lets them take a quick picture of him pulling him out with a film premiere in the background. It just instantly tells you so much about everyone in this scene, about Vincennes, about what about Sid, about how they were trying to paint this picture, and I love the fact that that's how they approach this story, because to me the best thrillers, even in crime fiction in general, the best things that you remember are rarely the crime. It's rarely the reveal. And there is a big reveal in this film as well, but it's the big stuff are these wonderful character moments and learning about them along the way.
It's a brave move to have three equal leads, and I think they are three equal leads. I mean, just because of the time, it probably wouldn't happen now. Just because of the time, Spacey was top billed because he's doing this on the back of Usual Suspects and Seven and things like that. The three of them, Spacey, Crowe, and Pearce, are absolutely incredible, and it's a brave move to have three such diverse characters all at the center of your story. But somehow, and this is something that screenwriters tend not to be able to do anymore, they don't seem to stand on each other's toes. They don't seem to cram each other, and they don't seem to be in any way extraneous. I think a film now would spend too much time setting up Vincennes' vanity, and it would take minutes of screen time. Whereas, you're quite right, all it needs is that one little turn of the suspects in front of the cinema and a flash of bulb, and it's done. That's all you need to know about Vincennes, pretty much.
But the other thing that they do, and this kind of leads into the costuming, and what people are wearing, also tells you so much, because Kevin Spacey's Vincennes is wearing fashionable clothes. He looks like a movie star, and detectives were really famous in the 1950s. They were as big as movie stars. And they were literally dating they were dating actresses. They were hot shit. People wanted to get with them. And he's definitely of that sort of Vincenz definitely have that sort of mindset, and it just
And
shows
again-
perfectly in the way he's presented, just
Yeah,
the
and
physical presentation.
and there are several scenes where he's at Hollywood parties and he's dancing he's dancing with starlets, and he's very he's completely at home.
Yeah. You know, but then you look at someone like Ed Exley, and the way he's the straight-laced kind of guy, and he's sort of detached, and he's always wearing gray and blue, cold. He's very cold, and you
V-neck
get
jumpers
that.
and ties. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Now, I do want to chat a little bit about the road to making this movie, because it's definitely an interesting and sort of complicated journey. So the film, was with WB, but they weren't happy with the initial scripts. They basically didn't want to do it. In fact, James Ellroy and his agent laughed when they said that they were going to try to adapt this book of his, because he was like, Elroy's like, this book is unadaptable. What are you doing? And if anyone who has looked at the book or who has read the book, you probably will understand what they mean by that, because there's so much stuff in there. But there was a couple of reasons why the studio weren't thrilled with wanting to do this movie. And one of those was that they didn't want another neo-noir. They didn't want another Chandler-esque movie. It's basically, to them, not very commercial. They also didn't want another historical movie, because historical fiction is very expensive. And then, of course, they're looking at the cast. There's 3 leads. This film isn't going to be able to support 3 big movie stars. They don't have the money for that. So there were talks of, one was like, the studio at one point told the director, why don't you cut Ed Exley? And he's like, no, you can't cut Ed. And like, okay, well, what if you cut Bud White? He's like, no, you can't cut that. Like, these characters have to stay. So basically, at the end of the day, WB were like, we're not going to finance it because of all of these problems, which is shocking to me. But when you think about it, is it that different today?
I don't think it is, and I don't think it was that different before. I mean, a similar thing happened with Richard Donner's Superman when the Salkins were trying to get that off the ground.
Yeah,
they faced all sorts of. Nobody wants to see, you're not going to be able to make him fly. Nobody wants to see a man in tights. Comic books are the Batman TV series cast a long shadow. No one wants to see that anymore, and essentially they got a negative pickup deal, I think it's called, where they say you finance it all and we'll distribute it. So I think Hollywood as an engine sort of goes around in circles, and the same. It's like the wheel turns, but the same spoke keeps coming up, and I think they go through these phases.
Yeah.
So I don't think it is any different today. I don't think it was different 20 years before this film was made. I think, and on films like this, Superman, LA Confidential, studios are often proved wrong. And they are often proved to not really know what they're talking about, as far as I can see. Because this is exactly what the public wanted. This is exactly what, exactly how you make a film of this sort out of a book of that sort and make it work. And we'd have been cheated out of a magnificent film if the studio had its way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
I don't think we can take those part of what I was saying before, that the 3 of them, they're all vital to the story in their own way. One
of the, I think, genius things that this film did that I don't think films today are as risky with is, Hanson went and sat down with New Regency, and basically they agreed to finance the film. But what Hanson wanted to do was cast unknowns as the leads. I mean, also the film had a budget of $15 million, which meant you wouldn't have been able to have cast 3 big leads.
You weren't getting 3 stars for $15 million, were you?
No, but I think it was such a stroke of genius to say, what I want unknown, because Kevin Spacey was big, but he wasn't very well known still. He was more of a theater guy at the time. He had, I think, he'd recently won, not won, but maybe was nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the time. And And Russel Crowe and Guy Pearce were, I mean, literally nobody knew who they were.
They were known in the UK as being in an Australian soap opera called Neighbours.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So that's how sort of big they were.
So I think that was a really daring choice, I think, to do.
It is.
Because
again, casting unknowns, referencing Superman again, Richard Donner was quite right. And he's talking about Christopher Reeve's Superman, but it's true of any unknown casting a big role. He said you can't, if you put Robert Redford or Paul Newman, which is who the studio wanted for Superman, in that costume, the audience are going to laugh and say, that's Robert Redford in blue tights.
Yeah.
But if you put somebody they've never seen before in that costume, they're going to say, that's Superman. And so a massive amount of work has already been done in the audience's head.
Oh, yeah.
Simply by that casting. And it's the same here, because Crowe's character is not a nice man. We'll come on to the characters later on, but he's not a nice man. And if you cast one of the big names at the time in that role, they would either have been going against type, or and audiences wouldn't have liked it, or they would have been too stereotyped as a tough guy for it to come off the way that it needs to come off. And because you've no preconceptions of Russel Crowe in that role, he becomes that character. So his journey becomes absolutely convincing and realistic.
That was one of the big concerns initially from New Regency. They were like, but these you want two Australians to play Americans in a period piece. You've got to be kidding me. Like we got to have, they got to be kind of known, like, come on. But what I loved about Hanson's response to that is what he wanted, as you were saying, he didn't want the audience to have a preconceived opinion, because he didn't want to cast someone who was well known and then be like, oh, well, I like that actor, I don't like that actor, so therefore I like that character and I don't like that character.
Yeah, because the whole point of Crowe's character and Pearce's character of White and Exley is that you have to not really like either of them until they team up. Then they become the epitome of good cop, bad cop. And there's just enough star power around these unknown leads. So with Danny DeVito and Kim Basinger, there's just enough smattering of star power to give it a lift, but it's not overburdened with it like some films can be. Casting an unknown, and it certainly works for LA Confidential for the reasons we've talked about.
Yes.
It's often seen as a risk, but in many instances, it can prove to be the best decision that the director and the casting agent makes.
From a writing standpoint, it was so laser focused on what is the most important thing, and it's the character and it's the mystery, and it's stripping away all the other stuff that's sort of, in the novel that would have gotten in the way if they tried to include too much of that stuff. A lot of their backstories is not really important. You can kind of infer a lot from the way they're dressed, or from the way they talk, or the way they respond to things, like where they're coming from. And you can kind of infer a lot from what's happening socially at the time, which is why I think, I love as you mentioned earlier, that opening, Danny DeVito's opening monologue. I mean, that in and of itself is just a brilliant setting up of the world in general. It's this wonderful glitz and glam that then suddenly descends into like people getting shot and killed in their cars, and just like, you're like, wow, this started off as like the place to be, but like there's murder around every corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole opening monologue is the film in a nutshell.
Yes.
It's the theme of the film in a nutshell.
Definitely.
It's what I call the Snow White's apple syndrome, which is that it's nice and juicy and rosy on the outside, but when you bite in, it's full of worms.
Yes.
And and that's exactly what Danny DeVito is setting up, and it's the perfect prologue to the film that follows. Yes.
So tell me about things that you liked about this. What were the big things that sort of stuck out to you on this rewatch?
The way it looks, it's beautifully shot. The fact that it's a film noir with very few of what the man in the street would accept as film noir tropes. Like I say, the dark streets, the rain, and all the rest of it. And the fact that it's got these three leads that have all got equal space, but none of them are clear-cut goodies. It's one of Elroy's ongoing themes that nobody is truly good and nobody's truly bad. We're a mixture of everything. And this film, again, for the 90s, there was very often a sort of goody and baddie dynamic going on, and you knew that Keanu Reeves on that bus in Speed was the goody and Dennis Hopper was the baddie. And the moral ambiguity that LA Confidential has, which is part of the reason I love film noir, because it's people who may have to do bad things when they don't want to.
Yeah.
All that is set up fantastically in this film and portrayed fantastically in this film.
Yeah.
And it's the journeys that those three people go on towards redemption from starting points of, in some cases, apathy, in some cases, personal revenge, in some cases, personal ambition. But slowly, the three of them put aside their differences. And the way that is told, there's not a single element of spoon feeding in this script. There's not a single element of, like you say, battering it over the head with these three are going to end up being buddies, because they don't really.
Yeah.
It's all done very subtly, and it's all done very economically, and it's done in, if I can say it this way, in a very adult way. That it treats the audience with total respect. I do find it very, well, on first watching it, the opening's very quick, and you think, who the hell is everybody? And it takes a bit of a while to sort of attune to who these people are.
Yeah. And
then it goes from one case to another very quickly. And you think, well, what was the point of the beating up the Mexicans in the cell if we're going to be investigating the Night Owl? And the way the movie doesn't allow you to think too soon, of course it's all connected, and it just drip feeds it in a very intelligent way.
Yeah.
I think it's a very literate script, and I think it's a very literate film.
Yeah.
But at no point does it drag. I mean, a lot of films drag for me sometimes, especially these days. I mean, this is done in, what is it? Is it under 2 hours? Just over 2 hours.
Yeah, just over.
Well, that's by today's standards, that's like almost as short. It's economical. To say the least. So I like. I mean, there's very little I dislike about this film, I have to say. There are a few things that jar, but the way it presents Los Angeles and the way it tells the story of Los Angeles that it wants to tell as intelligently as it does, I think deserves every credit you can give it.
One of the things that I really like about this movie is its ensembleness. That it is a proper ensemble, but it's also very, very character driven. And at one point, even Kim Basinger made a comment about this, and she was, she basically was saying that she was shocked that a big studio piece was this sort of ensemble, character driven vehicle. Because she's like, you kind of get this in indie films, but you very rarely get this kind of character-driven stuff from the big studio. She's probably talking about coming off of Batman and stuff like that, where there's wonderful character moments in Batman, but that's all about Batman and action, fighting, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this is, big studio movie, but rich in character, and there's action and there's suspense, but it's. You're just diving so deep into who these people are and why they're acting the way they are like that. I absolutely love that.
And what I like about that, I agree. And what I like about that is there are bits of action, finding the girl tied to the bed and the shootout there. And all that. So there's that sort of, but the big action comes at the end, and when you get it, it's a massive sort of old-fashioned Western shootout.
Yes.
But it matters for the very reason you just said. It matters because you've grown to respect these two blokes who are now standing against the town, as it were, on their own. They're doing the Gary Cooper in High Noon job, and it matters because you've got to know them. You know why they're doing it. You know what's at stake for them both.
Yeah.
Personally, individually, and together.
Yeah.
And you know what they've learned about themselves, because the film has taken its time to explain and to show why these two have come together. It's masterful storytelling.
One of the other things that I enjoy in this, because basically all the stuff that I love about this movie is the character stuff, which I think, what else is there to love? And it's set wide, beautiful sets, shot amazing, but the stuff that stands out is the character. I mean, there's two moments that I think really, really stand out for me. on that side, and one is just the general character arc for Exley, where when we meet him, he's so clean, he's so, straight laced. The captain is like, will you do this, will you do that, will you do this, will you do that, all kind of criminal activities as a cop, and he's like, no, 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 and he's like, will you shoot a criminal in the back as he's walking away from you, all this stuff they wonderfully set up. And then we see him one by one basically doing all of the things he said he wouldn't do. And I love the way that unfolded. But there's also things that are a little bit more, maybe a bit more subtle, that I really like. And that was one of the things is Kim Basinger's character, Lynn. I loved her apartment. I loved that her apartment, the first, the first floor that you go into, the ground floor, is a stage. Like, if you remember, the last episode we talked about the big sleep. Her apartment almost looks like the room that Marlo meets Vivian in the big sleep. There's the bed way back in the distance, and it's all, it's very much this stage. And our first time going,
I would say
intentionally, yeah. And the first time we visit this stage of hers, she's literally playing a Veronica Lake movie, because she's a Veronica Lake lookalike. And the guy that she's with, like, everyone knows that this is all an act, and they're just there for indulgence in this sort of fantasy. But then I love the moment where she begins this relationship with Bud White, and there's that moment where she doesn't sleep with him in the stage. She takes him to her real bedroom, and there's a pillow that was it Arkansas or Kansas? Arkansas. And he's like, and he says to her, he's like, why are you letting me in here? And she's like, she doesn't really know, but there's something real happening between them, where there's nothing real happening between the other people that come to see her, because he doesn't see her as Veronica Lake. No, he sees her as Lynn Bracken.
Well, he says, you're better than Veronica Lake. She says, I'm Veronica Lake. And he says, you're better than Veronica Lake. And they reference the famous, is it Rita Hayworth quote? She said something like, every man wanted to go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with Rita.
Yes.
And she says the same. She says, or Bud says to her, rather, all the other guys get Veronica Lake, I get Lynn Bracken.
Yeah. I love that.
And that comes on to one of the things I really do love about this film, which is how Bud changes, how she makes him change. And she says something to Exley. She says, I see Bud because I want to. I see Bud because he can't hide the good inside of him. I see Bud because he treats me like Lynn Bracken and not some Veronica Lake lookalike who fucks for money. That is a perfect bit of screenwriting for me, because that says something about her, and it says something about Bud.
Yes.
And if she's saying it to somebody, Exley, who at the time doesn't understand Bud.
Yeah.
Those few lines, those few sentences are doing three very important things in terms of screenwriting. And I love that idea. He gets the real woman and she gets the real man, because he's more than the tough guy. And she's more than the Veronica Lake lookalike. It's so well done.
It is. Oh God, no, it is. It absolutely is. The other thing that's really quite fun to me is, I want to just briefly also mention the shootout. Because when I was watching it, you were seeing the way. This is kind of that point in the movie where, as you said, Bud and Ed finally have to work together, and the way they work together is it's like a wonderful dance. Like, everything is so wonderful. Like, they're so in tune with each other. It also it reminded me of, like, if anyone who's seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and the ending of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, to me, I'm like, I mean, these two are basically in that same scenario, and they survive. And in my head, I'm like, maybe Butch and Sundance, maybe they do survive. Maybe they're so.
Well, that's the point I was going to make, because I referenced it before to being like a Western. Very often in Westerns, in certainly in B-movie Westerns, that the hero is going to survive.
Yes.
And that James Bond is going to survive.
Yes.
Really that Indiana Jones is going to survive. But there really is. That certainly on first watch, you don't know that either of these are getting out of there alive. you cannot be 100% certain that both of them are going to survive. You might guess that one will, for closure.
Yeah,
but you can't be certain. And when Bud gets shot, and he gets shot quite brutally, even the other night, I thought, he doesn't die, does he? I thought he survived.
Yeah.
So even on multiple watchings, it's so good that you can sort of forget that he does survive.
I forgot. I was like, oh gosh, he's dead. He's dead.
Yeah.
But I also, it's been so long since I've seen the movie that I forgot that Vincennes dies. I mean, that big reveal was nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I just want to say a quick word about that, because the story goes that Spacey couldn't keep his eyes still. So he was watching the actor playing Dudley, James Cromwell, whenever he moved. So he got someone to draw a circle on the wall, and he stared at the circle.
Yeah.
But that is shot. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't come out of nowhere, but it's a shock. It's a shock event.
Yes.
And then after that, it's shot almost as a close-up, a lingering close-up on Spacey. And after he says, Rollo Tomasi, and laughs, the acting that man does then is unbelievable. The way his eyes glaze, and the way that there's no overdoing it. There's no final breath. He just slips away.
Yeah.
But his eyes glaze, and that is a magnificent piece of screen acting.
God, yes.
One of my favorite moments in the film. It's so quiet and it's so still.
Yes.
And it's perfectly pitched. I defy anybody not to watch that and be in awe of how good that performance is. No,
it's truly one of the most, in terms of like impressive death scenes in cinematic history, that one has to be up there. And the other thing that makes that scene so bloody fantastic is it's, again, today, a lot of modern day movies, they would be like hamming it up with a big loud score, all this kind of crap. That scene is silent. There's no music. There's no music. There's no background, nothing. There's just this still moment of this guy, passing. That I just thought it's a masterclass in filmmaking, a masterclass in acting, masterclass. The scene is a masterclass in writing. Like, that is one of just an incredible scene as he realizes. But I love that in his dying moment, he says this name because he knows that name will get back to Ed, and he knows that will tip Ed off.
Absolutely, and
who the real villain is.
Spacey's close up when he dies, closely followed. It's almost like a setup and payoff. Closely followed by Pearce's close up when he realizes, when he's asked to look into who this Tomasi character is, and he knows then that Dudley is the villain.
Yeah.
To give Pearce his due, that close up and that acting is, in a different way, just as good as Spacey's death scene, because that realization, again, it's not overstated. Now there'd be like what's that, a zoom shot in or something, like when Roy Scheider,
the Hitchcockian zoom. They do that, and they Dutch angle it as well.
One of them, and
50 cuts in between.
And it's not. It's just Guy Pearce reacting. It's amazing work.
Oh, I loved it. That scene I thought was absolutely terrific. Gosh, that scene was great. Let's talk a little bit about casting. In general, like, I feel like everyone was perfectly cast. I mean, not everyone matches their descriptions from the book, but I think DeVito was great as Sid. I think James Cromwell was great as Dudley. All of these people I thought were just perfectly cast. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, I did. You're right about not always looking like the character in the book, and certainly Russel Crowe does not look like Bud White of the book.
Which he almost didn't take the film because of.
Which he absolutely. But what he did was he locked himself in a very small hotel room, so that he had to duck under doorways and not bang his head on the beams in the ceiling, so that he felt taller and bigger. But it's, as you mentioned Batman before, it's a similar sort of thing to me, that Michael Keaton's not a big fella, but he's got a presence.
Yeah,
and Russel Crowe has a presence in spades.
Yeah.
So he might not be the lumbering mountain of the book, but there's something possibly more terrifying about the fact that he is just an average size. that makes his brutality seem twice as horrendous. Because if he was a big fella, you'd expect it almost, but because he's obviously not physically intimidating in a sense, because the wife beater at the beginning, he pulls the Christmas decorations off the house, pulls the sled off the house. He tries to take him on, and he's within seconds beaten down. And it's, I've known people like that. I've known friends like that they are jiu-jitsu or whatever it is, champions, but they look like weedy. Well, Bruce Lee wasn't massive, was it?
Yeah.
And I think Crowe brings that to he brings that sort of raw power.
Yes.
And you get the sense that maybe this version of Bud White, because he's not big, maybe had to be tougher than his size allowed to survive. And he's carried that through into adulthood.
I think one of my other favorite bits of casting, I do find it hilarious that James Cromwell comes into this movie off the back of Babe, where he's playing this like nice little sheep herder
farmer.
And then here he's like this just nasty guy, but he's like his nastiness, and this is a testament to Cromwell's acting, is his nastiness is beneath. It's like he has this really nice kind of kind veneer, but it's just below one little scratch, and you can see through, and you can see like the nastiness is just there, and he handles that so well, I think.
You mentioned it before about saying, could you shoot a man in the back? Could you beat a confession out of a suspect you knew?
Yeah.
And isn't he doing that over glasses of eggnog and things? And then there's that little sort of, he said, well, don't be a detective, go and be a desk. And then he sort of says, lose the glasses. And that's a real malicious thing to say. It's a nasty thing to say.
He's saying you're weak because you wear glasses.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
real men don't wear glasses.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and obviously if he takes them off, he can't see. So he's going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, that's that scene when he's in the bullpen and they all leave, and he has to put his glasses on to go to look at the time.
To look at the time, yeah. So what that says about Dudley is that he is the schoolyard bully. Because he's saying the only way you can be a detective is to do things you can't do and literally not be able to see anything.
Yes.
So you've no chance.
Yes.
Boyo. He keeps calling him Boyo as well, which I find really
patronizing as shit,
condescending as shit.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I put that as my worst line, actually, because there aren't many bad lines.
No. I won't spoil mine now, but because as mentioning earlier, how this is really, really a character piece more than anything. I love the duality of every single character. I love that Bud is this. He comes across as just this thick muscle, tough guy, but what he really wants to be is, a detective. He wants to be smart. He wants to be kind and caring to Lynn. He doesn't want to be this brute.
He says, I'm the guy they bring in to scare the other guys shitless.
Yeah.
And then when he's in bed with Lynn, he says, if I could work homicide, I'd find out what was going on. I'm just not smart enough.
Yeah.
And it's her that says, yes, you are.
Exactly.
Because you found me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful little relationship.
Yeah.
In a couple of lines.
Yeah. And I love that they do the same thing with Ed as well. And again, he's this, again, straight-laced guy who just in the end becomes this, in a way, kind of like Dudley, where he becomes he knows how to move politically to get what he wants, and he looks straight-laced, and kind of a pushover, but actually he's very, very manipulative himself, and ends up being very brutal by the end of the movie with some of the stuff that he does.
And that's just a couple of things on that. He says, doesn't he? They're using me, so I'm going to use them.
Yeah.
At the end, he says it to Lynn. But what I like the character arc of Exley and White individually, but also I like the way that they sort of reverse mirror each other.
Definitely, yes.
So that Bud is Dudley's idea of the perfect detective, and Exley isn't. But by the end, Exley isn't far off being that. Whereas Bud has learned humanity. Yeah, he's learned love, and he's learned compassion, and he's learned sensitivity.
Yes.
That reverse.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it.
Yeah.
That reverse character arc working in tandem with itself is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Expertly done.
Expertly done.
Magical. One other one I want to mention is Danny DeVito's Sid.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters. Perfectly cast. I love Danny DeVito. There's nothing that he does that I don't like. He's a fantastic actor. But I love he's, this publisher of this trash rag magazine that's giving you gossip and all this kind of stuff. But it comes across like a trash rag. But to be honest, like he's not really. I don't really see Sid as a bad guy, because he's not going out to destroy good people. He is going out to expose the scum.
He is exposing the scum, yeah.
And I love that. I love that his thing is I will expose the truth with, and he doesn't care about the consequences, which, it becomes his ultimate undoing, obviously, because, he dies. But
I mean, it's the ambiguity of noir characters, in that he is trying to expose the scum, and he says so to Jack, to Vincent. He says something along the lines of, we're sort of trying to do the same thing here, and that is expose what this city's really about. But he isn't above planting some narcotics on a young actor to get a headline. Just as the cops in this aren't above, and the cops in a lot of noir aren't above doing a deal with a criminal if the end justifies the means. So that sort of three-dimensional, because that's what people are like, let's face it. That's what people are like. They will do what they need to do to get what they want, some people. We see it all the time in politics. We see it all the time in all, various walks of life, in various ways, shapes, and forms. So Sid is just a man with a job, trying to do that job to the best of his ability.
Yeah.
And he knows that sordid and scandalous headlines sell.
Yes.
So if he has to manufacture a few, he's not above doing it.
Yeah.
But his motives, his core motives, are the same as what the cops should be, and that is to expose all the nastiness.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up what I love about this movie and what I love about the book, and that is, I like when I think about my favorite characters throughout all of fiction, they're always ones that are complicated, and they might be seeking justice and trying to bring about justice, but they're always a little bit morally ambiguous. A lot of private eyes might, those characters, they are very morally gray. I think, even like with comic book characters, I love Wolverine. He's a murderer, and he murders people all the time, I think when I think about, those are the most interesting type of characters, and I think it's because they're the most real. And Elroy was very big on trying to be as authentic as possible with that sort of commentary on 1950s policing and the brutality and that scene with the three black guys that get arrested for the shooting at the Night Owl, and also the way they treat the Mexicans that they arrest earlier in the film. Like, there's so much nastiness, and you're like, wow, like it's hard to be rooting for anyone, and the police are doing nothing but trying to, PR the shit out of all this stuff so that they look good in the end, or try to look good in the end. And, everyone is cutting each other's throats, and Ed is fine to be a snitch because he's going to use that politically to move on. It's just,
absolutely.
It's so sleazy, but it's such an interesting, honest look at life then, and not that far off from life now.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I mean, they were fighting fire with fire.
Yeah.
And doing what was necessary. I mean, I think we mentioned, or we have mentioned in the past, Batman Begins, where Gordon has that speech about escalation. And that is really what LA Confidential is saying as well, that you know the police are in the position they're in because they've got to do something to stop the the gang's taking over.
Yeah.
And you can't always do that with a badge, and you can't always have badge of honor.
Yeah. Yes.
Detectives.
Yes. Yeah.
So Elroy's very much about that. He's very much about the fact that the police aren't necessarily nice people. They may be the law, they may be upholding the law, but what they're doing behind the scenes in order to uphold that law may not be something that you want to know about.
And I love that bit at the end when Ed tells people the truth. This is what really happened. And he's just sitting there in the interrogation room and he just smiles at himself at basically what he's become. And they're like, what's so funny? And he's like, they're gonna basically, Dudley is gonna go down as a fallen hero. They're not gonna expose the truth about his corruption. But the only way for that to stand, and Ed knows it, is for them to let him off.
Yeah, you're gonna need more than one hero. He says. I
love that.
And I love the fact that the only just mentioning badge of honor, the only time that the badge has got any honor is when Ed holds it up after shooting Dudley in the back.
Yes.
They make all this play about this TV series, and Vincenz is loving it and all that business. But the badge doesn't really mean anything in terms of being truly honourable.
Yeah.
Until that moment.
Yeah.
And it's just little touches like that make me think this film is head and shoulders above some films of similar types.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything in this film that you dislike?
I find this really difficult because I don't think there is. I don't think there's anything that I really actively dislike.
The producer, when they did one of the first screenings of this movie, from the guy from New Regency, can't remember his name now. When they watched the movie, he stood up before anyone could talk, and he's like, "Before you start asking me questions, I have no notes. You have created a work of art. This is the best movie we have ever done." And
I would tend to agree.
Yeah, I have no notes. I literally, this is a rare film where I'm like, I have nothing to criticize really, because I thought perfect. Oh,
there are certain things that I think I could, if somebody put a gun to my head and said, "You've got to find something bad about this," then I always wonder whether is it too hokey to have Bud throwing the DA out of the window and hanging him upside down by his trousers. And then I think
it's fun.
I can see why somebody might say that's a bit comical.
Yeah.
But in other respects, I think that's absolutely how it should be.
Exactly.
So there are some things that I might say, well, if I've really got to say something, that's all I can come up with. But I don't fully believe it when I say it. So
exactly. Best character.
Oh, Bud. Special mention for Ed, but Bud, and for the reasons we've said about him being a brute, a thug that becomes something quite different. And one of my favourite Bud moments, and bear with me, is when he does hit Lynn, because he's become what he hates the most, but not for the same reason his dad was one.
Yeah.
He's done it out of pure love for one woman.
Yeah.
Who he thinks has cheated on him.
Yeah.
And the minute he does it, the pain in his eyes, and he runs away, it is a brilliant bit of character writing and acting. And I just love that journey from somebody who everyone thinks they just bring him in to beat people in a chair.
Yeah.
And really he's got a brain between his ears and he uses it, and he ends up becoming as close to a hero as anybody is in this film.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a very heroic thing he does, and I mean cinema heroic, when he comes out of the floorboards and shoot. Ed's about to get shot, and he comes out of the floorboards. It's like Han Solo returning to finish off Darth Vader.
It is, yeah. Oh, I loved it. I love that.
I think Ed's journey is equally compelling. The performance is equally admirable. But I like the fact that it's thug to sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is a really interesting journey.
I think for me, it's a three-way tie between Sid, Ed, and Bud. I love all three of those characters equally, and I think it's because kind of what you mentioned earlier. It's the reversal. Bud is thug to not straight laced, but he's thug to good guy, and Ed is straight laced to bad guy. And I just love I just love Sid as a complicated, do anything to get the truth don't care about the consequences kind of guy. And yeah, so I think all three of those they all stand out to me equally. So I can't really say one is above the other for me, but I love all three of those.
This is the problem with this film. It's so good. It's very difficult to differentiate, brilliant from excellent. And it's very difficult to find flaw with it.
Do you have a worst character? I'll be honest, again, I do not.
No, no, I don't. Everybody serves a purpose, and everybody serves the correct purpose for their character. There's nobody acting out of character here. There's nobody really doing something that you think, would they do that?
Yeah,
they're all acting according to
nothing is out of place.
They've been set up to be.
Yeah, nothing is out of place. No one is out of place in this movie.
So I don't have a worse character, I'm afraid.
What about best? What's the best line for you?
I do like when after Bud's beaten Exley up, and he says, "The night owl made you, and you want to tear that all down." And Exley says, "With a wrecking ball, are you going to help me?"
Yeah,
I think that's a fabulous. That's a real sort of stirring. Right, we're on now.
Yeah.
And that's the line that drives the third act to the climax to me. And I think that Bud earns he gets a bit of respect for Ed when Ed says, "I'll tear down what made my name because it's not right."
It's one of my favorite lines because there are many, but I had to pick one from the opening monologue of Sid's where he says something. He's talking about LA and all the crime, all the corruption. He's like, something has to be done, but not too much because this is Hollywood. And I'm like, that just was such a perfect line. I was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly the way it is. That's exactly it. And I absolutely love that.
That is a great line.
I don't have a worse line. I don't think there's a bad line in this. Even Boyo, I like it because it's so patronizing.
Boyo, yeah, that's only come out since we've been talking because my notes for worst line just say, "Is there one?" And I was just going to ask you if you think there is one, but you've already answered that. I don't think there is. I don't think there's a duff line.
No. What for you is one of the most pivotal scenes that stands out to you?
We've mentioned a couple of them. Certainly, Spacey's death. Ed realizing that Dudley is behind it all. The beating up of Exley, but then the wrecking ball line. But I think I'm going to go with Bud Wyatt explaining why he hates men that beat up women, and that glimpse into his childhood, where he says it again. It would be so easy to do it with overplayed sadness. But he doesn't. He's not that sort of man. He tells it as it was, and it's left to her to be the compassionate one and to talk softly and say it's none of my business. I think she says at one point it's none of my business. Yeah, and he just carries on talking, and you get the impression it's the first time he's ever been able to say it.
I have three written down, but I'm just going to pick one, and it's a scene where Ed asks Vincennes, "Why did you become a cop?" And Vincennes just sort of goes blank, and you can tell that he's just lost. Like he has lost his soul. He has lost who he is, and he just says, "I don't remember."
I don't remember. Yeah,
and you feel that. You feel like he is just this. He's a guy in a dinghy in the middle of the ocean. He is just so lost. That, and again, that's fantastic scene.
That's the line that signifies the change in his character, because suddenly the badge of honor duties means nothing to him anymore.
Yeah,
he's got back into doing detective work on his own back, and realized actually this isn't just Hollywood parties and martinis and setting up young actors with marijuana. Yeah, there's an important job to be done.
Exactly.
It's a great scene, that, and again, done so economically, just done with one line.
I don't have a least favorite scene. I don't think there's a bad scene in this movie, so you can skip that. Out of the ratings, let's go to the rating. How many Falcons would you give LA Confidential out of 5?
Dare I give it 5, Luke?
I mean, if any film deserved 5, it's this. If
it's not a perfect film noir or even perfect film, then it's so close as to make no difference. The real critical part of me says I should give it 4.5 because is any film perfect? But I find it's the very fact we can't pick a worse scene, we can't pick a worse shot, we can't pick a worse line, we can't pick a worse character. I think I've got to give it 5 Falcons.
Yeah, I'm the same. This is a strong 5. This is without, and I don't think this is sort of being like hyper into it or anything like that. I think this is just if you look at it on face value, but even before go deeper than you dive into it, you like everything about this film is just so well done. The fact that it works and works to the level that it does, and nothing feels wasted. The way this story bounces from this, they arrest that starts off with the stuff on Christmas Eve, and then they arrest the Mexicans, and there's the fight, and then that leads to Bud's partner who gets fired.
Stensland.
Stensland, that's it. Sorry, I was getting confused with another guy.
Buzz Meeks, who's found dead under that house, and she says, "I think it's rats." She says, "What is rats?" He says, "Yeah, a big one."
Yes, and everything plays off. Everything is set up. Everything is paid off. It's an expertly made film.
I think it is. I think it's as close to perfect as you can get. So we both give it 5.
Well, that is LA Confidential.
Giving it 5 stars seems a good way to end.
Well, folks, that is our investigation into LA Confidential. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you back in the consulting rooms next week. Until then, please do like and subscribe, and make sure to take care walking down those mean streets. We'll see you next week.